deferring them. We have limited capacity at the municipality, but extends the April 15th and June 18th deadlines to Friday, October 30th for those who qualify. The program assists small businesses with an assessed value of about $7.5 million, which captures 91% of commercial properties in the City of Ottawa. And at every opportunity, I've urged all those commercial property owners who will benefit from this deferral to pass it along to their restaurants and shops and the small businesses that are the backbone of the economy, the ones who desperately need this flexibility at this very difficult time. More than 2 weeks ago, we launched our Buy Local promotional campaign, which encourages residents to support local businesses by ordering products and gift certificates online or ordering takeout or delivery from local restaurants. Mona showed me a great example at Louis Pizza on MacArthur, where they're selling pizza kits. We can actually put the pizzas together and do a family activity. And I'm going to go there sometime this week and pick up my pizza kit. And I've ordered now, I think, 5 or 6 gift certificates from different businesses to help them out in the short term. To date, our Buy Local campaign has generated over 30,000 visits to our ottawa.ca/buy local page, where residents can link to various BIAs and other sites providing listings of restaurants and businesses that are open, have online capacity or curbside or delivery opportunities. In addition, we created the Business Support and Economic Recovery page at ottawa.ca. This is a page that provides helpful information and links to city, provincial, and federal programs, and urge you to look at it, see if there's information that's not there that we could add, and get back in touch with Sue Ling so she can bring it up at the economic table. We'll continue to work with the Economic Partners Task Force in the coming weeks as we begin our city's economic recovery. Before I wrap up, I wanted to say how impressed I've been with the generosity and ingenuity of Ottawa's business communities. During the last council meeting, I used 7 or 8 great examples of local companies who are shifting production lines, for instance, going from spirits to hand sanitizer and everything else in between. Despite their own struggles, they're working to help others who are worse off than they are. So it's a long and impressive list, and I thank everyone for the opportunity to boast a little bit about Ottawa ingenuity, and I'll hand it back to Sue Ling and look forward to the questions. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Watson. Minister MacLeod.
Thanks, Sue Ling, and thanks to everybody for taking the time this morning so that we could have an opportunity to speak with you. It's also wonderful to see you, Mr. Mayor, and you, Minister Fortier, and I wish you both the best of luck as we go through this together at each of our levels of government. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with Sue Ling each week, as well as with local leaders from the tourism, film, hotel, and business improvement areas as the local MPP for Nepean. As the Provincial Minister for Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, I have been convening bi-weekly telephone town halls and created 14 industry-led sectoral ministry advisory committees for advice on the recovery and rebuilding of our nearly $75 billion suite of sectors and industries. While COVID-19 is first and foremost a public health crisis, and our efforts at all 3 levels of government ought rightly be focused on the health, well-being, and safety of all Ontarians, the economic fallout is undeniable and felt very swiftly and very hard, particularly in the areas that are within my mandate. The data that has been collected from our partners indicates an estimated $17.6 billion hit to our sectors, with much of the 400,000 job losses coming from the tourism, hospitality, culture, and sports sectors. As governments, we are working closely with our municipal and federal counterparts as we build out supports for people and businesses, and eventually for our sectors. At the provincial level, our COVID-19 action plan is making $17 billion of resources available to combat this pandemic. That includes $3.3 billion in support for our healthcare system, $3.7 billion in direct support for people and jobs, and making up to $10 billion available to ensure that businesses have cash flow during this difficult time by allowing employers to defer WSIB payments for up to 6 months, doubling the employer health tax exemption in 2020, and providing greater flexibility to Ontario businesses struggling to meet other provincially administered tax programs. We meet daily as a cabinet and have made many tough yet necessary decisions on public health orders, emergency measures, and essential services, including today's continuation of a 28-day state of emergency. In addition, Premier Ford has appointed an Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee, and I was honored to be part of that team. Finally, each week, I meet with my federal counterparts on sector-specific responses for heritage sport, tourism, and culture. While Minister Fortier will have clearer lines of sight into the federal response, I assure all of you that our governments are working together at this unprecedented time at an unprecedented level. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity each week to inform the federal government of the needs and issues facing all of our industry partners during this crisis with both the Federal Minister of Economic Development and the Federal Minister of Heritage. There's no playbook to what we're going through together and experiencing in our city and across Ontario. Collaboration is the best policy right now as we navigate the many uncertainties brought on by COVID-19. Within my ministry, I've asked my team to turn their attention to build out a 5-year plan that looks not only at recovery, but rebuilding and reemerging in a world market. So we are again competitive and leading at an international level in being a destination of choice, supporting and producing the best artists and athletes, and promoting a double bottom line that protects our cultural fabric as Ontarians and grows our economy. My hope for us here locally is that we start that process as well. As sport minister, I think it's appropriate to quote Wayne Gretzky, who once said, quote, "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it's been." We have no choice but to do just that. We must all invent a new playbook based on new circumstances. And given the rest of the world has our same playing conditions, it will be our foresight and planning right now that will be advantageous to our economic outlook when this is over. I look forward to working with all of you and every single person on this call to do just that. So thank you, Su Ling, and I look forward to the question and answers.
Thank you, Lisa. Minister Fortier.
I needed to unmute myself first. Bien, merci tout le monde de m'avoir invité aujourd'hui. Thank you for having me today. And first, I really want to begin by thanking Su Ling for your leadership and the Ottawa Board of Trade. What you've been doing for the past few weeks is really amazing.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank, of course, Lisa and Jim for sharing the stage this morning. You know, it's really important that we work together in these unprecedented times. And I want to echo what Minister MacLeod just mentioned and agree that there is no playbook at this time. And we have to realize that playbook together. And that's why it's so important that we all collaborate together. And I also want to mention that over the past few weeks, I had the opportunity to speak with the Chamber, as well as the mayor, local leaders, councillors in the community, and making sure that we're all on the same page. And these conversations have helped shape our understanding of the realities we are here facing in Ottawa and at every level. And I want to thank you for allowing us this opportunity to answer questions from businesses and Canadians in the community. Je suis certaine que vous conviendrez tous que nous nous trouvons dans une période de crise sans précédent, alors que nous luttons contre les impacts sanitaires, sociaux et économiques de la pandémie de la COVID-19. Nous sommes très conscients que les entreprises canadiennes et les travailleurs souffrent depuis le début de cette période difficile et que tous les secteurs de l'économie continuent d'être touchés par la COVID-19. C'est pour cela que nous agissons très vite, rapidement, pour aider le plus Canadiens possible. We know that due to the severe impacts this pandemic is causing, businesses need help to keep more workers employed so that Canadians can keep up with their bills. The approach we have taken to respond to this unprecedented crisis has been based on 3 steps. Firstly, we are ensuring that the health and safety of Canadians is at the heart of everything that we are doing. Secondly, we are working to ensure everyone is protected and nobody falls through the cracks. And lastly, we are putting in place measures to address the needs and to find solutions for all Canadians. And this is why for the last 3 weeks, we have announced a series of broad economy-wide supports as part of Canada's COVID-19 economic response plan. Through this plan, we're providing more than $100 billion in direct support, $85 billion in liquidity support through income tax, GST, and customs duty payment deferrals, and over $570 billion in additional credit and liquidity support. Additionally, last week, millions of Canadians, almost 5.8 million Canadians, began applying for the new CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which was set up to make sure everyone can afford to put food on the table, pay for housing, and necessary medicine. Now, this benefit provides $2,000 a month for up to 4 months to workers who lose their income as a result of this pandemic. To make it as flexible and accessible as possible, the benefit is available to workers whether or not they are eligible for employment insurance. Alors, cette mesure importante a été mise en place pour aider financièrement des millions de Canadiens touchés par la pandémie. Et le lancement du programme a commencé lundi dernier et plus de 5,8 millions de Canadiens en ont fait la demande. Et nous allons continuer à faire tout ce qu'il faut pour que les Canadiens dans diverses situations bénéficient du soutien dont ils ont besoin. De plus, pour aider les entreprises à conserver leurs employés ou à les réembaucher et pour les préparer à la reprise, nous avons également introduit la subvention salariale pour les entreprises admissibles. So the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, also known as the CERB, which applies at a rate of 75% of the first $58,700 normally earned by employees, represents a benefit of up to $847 per week for the 12-week period from March 15th to June 6, 2020. This subsidy will prevent further job losses and encourages employers to rehire workers previously laid off as a result of COVID. We also announced last week that the subsidy will be available to employers who have suffered a drop in gross revenues of at least 15% in March and 30% in April and May. Employers of all sizes and across all sectors of the economy, with the exception of public sector entities, are now eligible for this CERB. Bakeries, movie theaters, hardware stores, if they have been significantly impacted by COVID-19, they are eligible. And just this weekend, I was present and we saw this piece of legislation pass through the House of Commons, the Senate, and received royal assent by Saturday night. And by keeping their employees, Canadian companies will be in a better position to bounce back quickly after the crisis. We also have introduced a new Canada Emergency Business Account. We call it the CEBA. This program will provide up to $25 billion to eligible financial institutions, including the 6 big banks and credit unions that are accredited, so they can provide interest-free, partially forgivable loans up to $40,000 to small businesses, including non-for-profits. These loans are guaranteed and funded by the Government of Canada and will ensure that small businesses have access to the capital they need at a 0% interest rate to pay for rent and other important costs over the next number of months. Le plan d'intervention économique est là pour répondre à la COVID-19 et est l'investissement en temps de paix le plus important et le plus rapidement déployé dans l'histoire du Canada. Nous avons travaillé fort pour en arriver là, mais nous continuerons à le faire tant que cette situation persiste. Nous sommes prêts à faire tout ce qu'il faut pour assurer la sécurité des Canadiens. Nous avons dit et nous avons pris ces mesures et d'autres pour aider à protéger les emplois dont dépendent les Canadiens en ces temps difficiles. In these unprecedented times, we will continue to carefully monitor all developments related to COVID-19 and work hard to ensure businesses get the support they need. Know that we are creating, developing, adapting, and delivering in record timing as we speak. This type of conversation is part of the process and development and evolution of the programs. Now, today, with your ideas and your questions, they are so valuable because they help us mold our approach and responses. And I want to thank you again for your time and for all the work you are doing in our community. I also want to recognize all the public servants that have been working very hard to bring forth these programs. But you know what? In these difficult times, we know that we will get through it. And the way we will do it is by working together. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mona, very much. Okay, now to the questions. Thank you, Mona, for keeping me on track. So the first question is around testing, and it's to all. We continue to see Ontario struggling to increase COVID testing, and the Premier is saying he continues to be frustrated by this. So the first question is to Mayor Watson. Can you advise on what the current situation is in Ottawa? What is our daily testing capacity and our actual numbers? And do you foresee any changes in these numbers in the next few weeks?
Yeah, thank you. So we have capacity now. We're testing about 700 a day. These are numbers for Eastern Ontario, not just Ottawa. They're not broken down that way. In the next 2 weeks, our daily capacity is going to go up to about 1,000 per day. We're increasing staff, training staff, ramping up testing. And then in the next month or so, we hope to get up to 2,300 per day. We're next on a distribution list from Roche in Canada for a new machine, which is about 3 to 6 weeks away for training, and validation takes 2 weeks. That can test the patients literally within a couple of hours. So we still have the assessment center that's open at Brewer, and it's treating about 300 people a day. And we also have special centers set up, not necessarily for testing, but if you have come down with some of the symptoms at Aubrey Moody School in Nepean, as well as the old St. Pat's School on, I think it's on Heron Road in the Alta Vista area.
Thank you. And then Jim, just a follow-up question. When can Ottawa residents expect to be able to access the serological antibody test kits that we're sending out to the UK and the US?
Yeah, I think it just got Health Canada approval, if I'm not mistaken, in the last couple of days. So I don't know the answer to that, but the fact that they've got Health Canada approval is good news and a good local success story. So I hope as soon as possible, because that obviously would cut down the wait time. You know, people are anxious, obviously, to go for testing, and they're having to wait long periods of time. So yeah. I commend our Dr. Etches, who's doing a remarkable job, and her team. We were there for the first day of testing at Brewer, and it's going very well.
Thank you. Minister MacLeod, can you help us understand what the blockages are for Ontario testing? Is it carrying out the test, processing the results, and what is being done to address this?
Well, first and foremost, I want to just echo what Jim has said about Dr. Etches as well as Dr. Williams provincially. We are very fortunate in this province to have strong healthcare leaders, and I'd be remiss not to say thank you to them, and just to also put a plug for a telephone town hall I'm doing this afternoon in my constituency. I had Dr. Etches as well as Dr. Faulkner from the Queens by Carleton Hospital 2 weeks ago. And the questions coming from my community on that online forum were incredible. A lot of people very concerned. So we're doing that again this afternoon at 3:10 for about an hour. Look, I have to be honest, the Premier says it the best. He's frustrated. We have been trying to put a lot of people's feet to the fire. We have been in recent days able to clear a backlog of 11,000 test cases. We do have a self-assessment tool online where you can also now check your laboratory results. So we're moving in the right direction. We're very excited that Spartan Bioscience, based here in Ottawa, I believe on Gurdwara in the riding, the magnificent riding of Nepean, has been able to get those tests. So we have ordered, I believe, 900,000 tests, and we expect to be by mid-April testing people at the rate of about 18,000 a day. So we're moving in the right direction. It has been frustrating, and I think when you see the Premier's face, it is palpable, his frustration on behalf of all Ontarians, and I can just say he has been an incredible leader during this time. I've had the opportunity to obviously speak with him on a daily basis and talk a lot about that Ontario spirit that we're seeing, especially from that ingenuity here with Spartan Bioscience, and we'll continue to do that. But there's been no excuse to date, and certainly I can tell you that the political leadership coming from our Premier to advance this, to make sure that our jurisdiction is tested and that the people of this province are safe and free from COVID-19 is important. But again, just to point out that we have the COVID assessment tool, and then also if you need to call telehealth, I'll give you that number as well, 1-866-797-0000.
Thank you. Minister Fortier, given Ontario is so far behind on this critical issue, is it possible for them to receive particular support from the federal government?
Well, first I want to say that we've been in this for like 3 weeks, a month now, and I really want to commend how hard the government of Ontario, the city of Ottawa, everybody has been really pulling through to make sure that we're making the right decisions. And as many unknowns that we have as we go, we have to rely on evidence and science. And I know that Dr. Tam with the Public Health Agency of Canada has been working very hard with her counterparts across the country. And we're all working because we want to make sure we protect Canadians and their safety as our #1 priority. I would really want to put that out there, that we're making sure that we're investing in health and investing in equipment. We're investing in research. The first thing we did was invest $1 billion about 3 weeks ago for research and health equipment, and helping the provinces to start with the needs that they had at the time. I know that Deputy Premier, Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland has been working very hard with the premiers, trying to make sure that we're all on the same page and needed to work together. So I would just again want to say that as we go and we move along, we will continue to make sure that the priority of health and safety is #1. And we have been putting a lot of investments, as you can see, record amounts to make sure that we focus on that.
Thank you. The next question is around borders and to start interprovincial borders. So will there be any efforts made to work with the Quebec government to reduce restrictions in travel for property owners from Ottawa to Quebec, as well as opening up the interprovincial barriers, particularly that are challenging in Ottawa-Gatineau for its businesses, workers, and inhabitants? So Mona, would that be for that? Could you speak to that?
Well, I would try to be careful in how I answer this question, because we know that the provincial governments are really assessing their needs in the provinces, and the fact that we are a border community with Gatineau is something we have to look at. Right now, the measures that we're trying to put forward is the fact that we want people to stay home unless they have to work or be with essential services. I think that we're all pulling together to try to flatten the curve, and right now that's our focus. So I would say that unfortunately, it must be very hard that they can't go necessarily on the other side from Ottawa to Gatineau. Some will go, but we're enforcing and hoping that everybody will put the health in front of the priority they should set. Mm-hmm. Now, public servants have been able to go to work. Essential services have been able to work. We're trying to better coordinate, I believe, with the province of Quebec. And I think that we have to continue to monitor what is happening and make sure that we put, again, the safety and health of our communities first.
Very good. A question to all around policy making. So
just Suling, I was just, Jim and I have spoken about this quite a bit. Can we just jump back to the border issue?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree 100% with Mona that every Ontarian and every Canadian right now should be social distancing when they can. They should be staying home. I would not advise any travel at this time. Jim and I speak frequently about this issue, and he may want to chime in because I know he's spoken extensively with the mayor of Gatineau. At this time, obviously, if we are to move to a situation where we would close our borders to other Canadians in Ontario, we would want a national framework for such things. Right now, there's an inconsistency at the Manitoba border, for example, compared to what's happening at the Quebec border. And we do recognize in some of the maritime provinces there's a different application as well for what this all means. Our preference is Ontarians stay home, stay safe, and social distance, while at the same time understanding that the nation's capital is is different than any other beast in the country, because we are so interconnected between our two cities. Our federal government operates on both sides of the border. There are so many essential workers on either side of the border that make their livelihood on the other side. So we recognize that this is a significant issue, but it's one I can assure everyone on this call that Jim and I speak about this regularly, as well as the Premier is aware of where my views are on this at this particular time. So again, I think if we're to move toward that, it probably there should be some sort of a framework nationwide, but certainly we're not looking at that at the moment. Jim, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, for bringing that up, and thank you for your help on this issue. I've made it very clear that it is not a priority for us at the City of Ottawa to put police at the border doing what Gatineau Police and the SQ are doing on the Quebec side. The reality is that our Chief of Police, Chief Slowly, has told me very clearly it would stretch his resources and it would put his officers at greater risk. Unfortunately, I just read today about a Gatineau police officer who has contracted the COVID-19 virus. And we've seen pictures of the officers sticking their heads in cars, and that doesn't help the passenger or the driver or the police officer from social distancing. So I very much not in favor of putting police resources at our 5 bridges. If we had to do that, we'd have to free up 50 to 70 police officers, according to Chief Slowly, which again would put the officers at risk, number one, and secondly, take them away from more pressing police matters. Obviously, heading out to a cottage is not a priority, and people should use common sense. If there's a reason to go to the other side, whether it's for work, legitimate work purposes, essential work that you're in, or to visit a loved one if you're getting groceries for your elderly parents, obviously those are the kinds of things that make sense, but not to put up these spot checks at the different border crossings. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lisa, I know that we have spoken about it too, just in general terms, how the provinces work together to ensure there's no disparity between measures and access to provinces. But you're right, in the nation's capital, it requires some unique attention because it's like we're borderless here with Gatineau. So we appreciate you mentioning that. I have to ask a question about rent relief. A lot of the programs that have been announced so far still do not address fixed costs for small business with little or no revenue, and in particular rent. The issue remains dire with May rents coming due. What plans do we have to put relief in the system so that banks, landlords, and utility companies can all bear and share the burden without leaving small business left with all the debt? So I know Mayor Watson, there was a letter put out the other day about the idea that could the city have a longer tax deferral for those that need it, and that payback could be amortized over a lengthy period of time. And I know we've spoken about it, and of course the city has its own financial challenges with too many deferrals because we cannot run a deficit. But is there an opportunity for the provincial and the federal government to support us in a strategy like that?
Yeah, maybe, I think this was Sean's question that I see. Sean, thank you for that. I guess a couple of things. First of all, we did bring in the deferral program, which brings a little bit of relief, at least from the payment of June to pushing it back to October. Yep. Secondly, Wendy Stevenson, who is our treasurer, who's also doing a great job, she just started in the job a few months ago, is looking into what else we can do. I don't want to lead people astray to think there's a magic solution to this, because as you pointed out, Su-Ling, we're not allowed to run deficits by law, which is a good thing. But secondly, the challenge we have is that we're also losing about $1 million a day in revenue. So we saw at council those numbers amortized over a long period of time are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're going to try to do what we can. We recognize that the challenge that tenants have and landlords have, and trying to come up with that common ground. And that's why we've said that when we're going to bring in the hardship tax deferral to October, that deferral of the tax portion of someone's rent should also be passed on to individual renters as well. So they take some of the benefit from that as well.
Thank you. Minister MacLeod or Minister Fortier, is there anything that your levels of government are looking at in terms of rent relief?
Sure. You know what? I'm very sympathetic here. I think if, you know, when we get through this, we're going to want to make sure that we still have restaurants, pubs, that type of thing, tourist attractions, and moving forward. And I was so disappointed last week when I was meeting with one of my festival groups in southwestern Ontario, where they had actually been locked out, I think 2 days after. I don't think that that's the right response. Everyone's in this together. And as the Premier said, you know, the end of this story will be written by all of us, so we have to be responsible. And I would encourage anybody that is renting to a small business to be responsible. But I'm again very sympathetic to this rent deferral issue, and I can tell you when we speak with our tourism ministers across the province, federally, provincially, and territorial, this issue and liquidity comes up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And so Mona may be able to speak a little bit more to this, but I'm expecting that we're probably going to see a hospitality sector, tourism type stimulus package or bailout at that level. And we will then, of course, work within our level to really close the gaps. And that's why the Premier has turned his attention into economic recovery. Well, his full attention is on the health and well-being of Ontarians, but that there's a group of us now working on the recovery. And so he created the Ontario Jobs Recovery Committee. And then in addition, within my ministry, I have asked them to start to looking at a 5-year plan and with incremental test backs with metrics. And I know Michael Crockett is on this call, so he's on one of my advisory committees for tourism. And I know that Bruce, I think, is on here as well. He's on my film and television. So we're looking at that, and we certainly do have restaurants and hotels that are part of that conversation and hospitality. So we're pretty broadly looking at recovery and what happens after this. But we'll take at this step of where the liquidity is from the federal government, and we'll work with them. But I've been encouraged by my conversations. So maybe Mona has more to say. She'd probably have a clearer line of sight into that.
Okay. Mona?
Thank you. And, you know, I think we all understand that small businesses are the hardest hit right now by the crisis. And we've been, as you know, and I mentioned, putting many emergency measures to ensure that businesses that are hardest hit have access to support for operating costs. The Canada Emergency Business Account is one way. There is also other ways that we're trying to identify by working with the provincial and hearing what we're hearing on the ground from Chamber of Commerce, Board of Trades, like the Ottawa Board of Trade. And we're trying to look at what else we can do to support, because we know that May 1st is coming and there's a lot of pressure for that, I'll say, short term. But we also have to start looking at recovery, as Lisa mentioned. And right now, because we've put so much energy on what's happening right now, we want to also start looking at recovery, and we will have to be very thoughtful on how we will support businesses during that phase. Mm-hmm. So I would tell you that we've done some measures so far to help businesses cope, but it's not enough, and we know, and we've been working, and I'm hopeful that we'll have other measures that will be able to support small businesses in the short future.
Thank you. I'll maybe stay with you, Mona. The next question is around business support. And I know through the work that we're doing, particularly with the Canadian Chamber, that your government is very attentive to the specific cases. There's so many specific cases that have fallen through the cracks of the policy pieces. And just wondering if you're, continue to look at how we can tweak the programs. I have a few examples here. One is the structure for the loans leaves out businesses that pay consultants and sticks to a definition of employee that is outdated. Is there something that can be addressed for consultant-based businesses? Another is self-employed individuals who've had their income reduced significantly but not to zero, and therefore are not covered by CERB. Some of these are essential services such as psychotherapists and other mental health experts. Is there any? So those are sort of two examples of ones that are like falling through the cracks.
Again, thank you for mentioning that. We know that we, as I mentioned during my remarks, that we're creating, developing, designing, and delivering all those programs as we speak. So we know that they are imperfect, but we are supporting a very large group of businesses with what we have put forth. We do know that we need to look at, I'll start with the self-employed, knowing that some are still having a bit of income, and they are therefore not they can't have access to CERB. The Prime Minister mentioned about a week ago that we're looking into those that are earning a very small income still, how we can support them. So I'm hopeful that we will have something new to share this week or in the next few days, hopefully, for the CERB and those that have access to a little bit of income, but not enough to pay the bills. And as for consultants, I mean, it's really important that right now, any small business consult with their financial institutions. The government has been committed to work with financial institutions to really help Canadians and businesses case by case, and there might be other programs that could be suitable for those businesses. We have different, multiple types of loans through the Business Credit Accessibility Program also that could be available. And as I mentioned, we're going to continue to take action on what is needed, and hopefully we can really address those gaps that have been identified in the past few weeks by Board of Trades and conversations we've been having with many businesses.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask you one more question about the CERB. So there's the other side of the CERB where some small businesses pay part-time or university students to work, and now they're able to make more on the CERB than if they were staying in the business, and they're more interested in doing that. Is that something that you have looked at as well?
Well, first, we're really encouraging businesses with the wage subsidy to keep their employees if possible. Now, we know that some, again, like students and part-time workers might want to use the CERB. At this time, we are working on trying to really identify who are falling through the cracks. So as we go, we will put more flexibility with either the programs we have now or set new programs to be able to cover and help the students or even part-time workers. Already we announced that the Canada Summer Jobs Program will be one good measure to be able to support students and have access to jobs in the during the summer, and also we've extended to next February. So that will be 70,000 jobs across the country. And we know that in our region, in Ottawa, there are many jobs offered through Canada Summer Jobs Program that will be announced shortly. The Member of Parliaments are all working on the list they've received. So that'll be an opportunity. But then we know we still have to identify others, and we're working on it. And I would also commend the fact that many of you who are watching today might have ideas or even considerations we should be taking. So I will welcome those ideas because we are working together on this.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think we're going to switch the conversation a little bit to recovery now, if that's possible. And I had a question on here, Lisa, about tourism and how it's one of our largest economic sectors and largest employers, and of course has been devastated by this crisis. So looking ahead, how should this critical industry be a huge part of Ottawa's economic recovery? I might start with you, Lisa, but then also refer to Jim as well.
Well, thanks very much, Celine. And I think it was maybe Michael Crockett that asked that question. He's been a tremendous leader for me, provincially wide. So no question, we have a $75 billion suite of sectors. $36 billion has been generated over the years through tourism across the province. Obviously in areas like Ottawa, Toronto, Muskoka, Niagara, and the Thousand Islands, just seeing tremendous it's sad to see. It's very difficult to learn. So what I've done in terms of tourism is, obviously I meet weekly with the Federal Minister of Economic Development, and we'll be looking at I think a nationwide approach. But in the province of Ontario, I've done a couple of things immediately. The first was I retooled the Tourism Development Fund into the Tourism Development and Recovery Fund. So I tripled the investment there from $500,000 to $1.5 million. So we'll be changing some of the parameters around that, so private companies will be able to access that, so that they're here when we need them at the end of this. Second thing is, we are going to start, we've maintained our business-to-business relationships around the world. We have redirected our marketing dollars, and we're ready to go on a marketing campaign when it's safe to do so, in coordination with the government. We are also working on something called Ontario Live, so that we can get digital content up in the air. So we've already launched something called musictogether.ca as part of an Ontario Live initiative. We are going to have over 200 pieces of digital content going out to support Ontario artists and athletes and attractions, and hopefully be able to start selling online attraction tickets as well to support them. I've just completed a 13 region tour of Ontario virtually, of course, with my colleagues, so we can get a sense in each region what the needs are and the requirements are. And we had a very good meeting here in Ottawa, chaired by MPP Goldie Gamari. And we have just announced last week close to $100 million of grants that will be going out the door to continue to support our festivals and events and programming across the province. But turning our attention to more of a long-term strategy, I'll be working with the 13 RTOs, including with Michael. We'll be looking at the municipal accommodation tax. We'll be looking at marketing dollars. We'll be looking at staycations. One of the things that I floated with the federal government, which I think would be a great idea, is similar to what happened with the economic recession back in 2009, 2010 area. The federal government brought in a home renovation tax credit. I think in order to get Ontarians and Canadians moving again, it would be a good idea to consider a travel tax credit, where we would support our local hotels. Our airlines are having a rough go. We meet with them weekly as well. And then getting people just to explore their own country again once this is over, and then obviously welcome the world back to our province. But I think, and I think Michael would agree, I've been saying this for a long time, we are the world in one province. Right now, the places that we compete with for basically almost everything, whether that's tourism or film and television or music, is New York and Los Angeles, and then some other places in Europe. I think that our public health response, our security, and our low dollar, and the fact that we're a relatively safe community would speak well to making those attractions. So we're starting now to turn our attention to the opportunities that will exist after this. I say to my ministry all the time, opportunity, potential, possibility, what is it, what is it, what is it? And so that's where we're at right now. And I think when we come through this, that we're going to be very well positioned as a global leader to attract people back and then start to rebuild that economy. But I think, to an earlier point on the rent deferral, the one thing that I often say with our cultural attractions and our assets in tourism is that we need to make sure that when this is over, that they're still there. And so that's what keeps me up at night, but it also is what gets me up in the morning.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, Suling, maybe if I could offer, that was a great summary of initiatives, and we're lucky to have Lisa as the minister in charge of that, as one of our local MPPs. Just a couple of points. Obviously, tourism is our third largest business job creator here in the city of Ottawa. Government, of course, is first, high tech is second, and tourism hospitality is third. We've made a decision to continue funding our major events activities. These are things like the festivals, for instance, Jazz Fest and Tulip Festival, which unfortunately are going to be canceled this year. But we didn't want to cancel their funding, even though they're not going ahead, for the simple reason that they have fixed costs that they operate year round with, hiring staff and so on, and we don't want them to go out of business. So we're doing our small part. We also are open to discussions with Michael and his great team at Ottawa Tourism and Steve at the Ottawa Hotel Association for a discussion on increasing the municipal accommodation tax once things get back up and running. Because, as you know, almost the entire budget of Ottawa Tourism comes from the MAT, and we want to make sure that they have the capacity to go out and hit the ground running by advertising Ottawa, as a place to go and travel. And, I think the staycation idea is a great one. I saw a brochure that I tweeted about from 1,000 Islands, and people would say, why are you sending this out now? Well, probably because they had a contractual agreement, but also they want to have that hanging around people's homes so that when we're through this pandemic, people will actually go to the Thousand Islands or Gananoque or Kingston or wherever. And likewise, we'll be able to advertise in their markets to get them to come into Ottawa and get.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to try and marry a couple of questions here around preparing for recovery, and that there will be a backlog of economic activity that will be necessary to restore the economy. What are we doing at the various levels of government to make sure that we're ready to handle that demand when the time comes? And specifically, you know, if we're looking at infrastructure projects, how can we quickly process permits? How can we get architects in place so that these projects we can hit the ground running when the time comes? So Jim, can I start with you on that one?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things. Well, you know, we're grateful that the province has continued to ensure that, excuse me, these major transportation and road and sewer and waterworks projects are considered essential, because we believe they are. I just look out my office window here on Elgin Street, and there's people, you know, laying the sidewalk for the end of that construction project. We just started today the Montreal Road project in Mona's ward, and of course we have our Library and Archives Canada joint facility that's proceeding. The architects are continuing to work on that and refine that particular project. Stage 2 of LRT, there's construction going on the far east end, the west end, the south end, out by the airport. You go by the airport parkway, you see the bridge for the train that's going overhead. So we're working very closely with those people in the development industry to ensure that we have the capacity. Even though most of our people are working from home, they're still able to process permits and so on, so that these individuals can continue to do the work. Now, on the home building industry, it's a little different. New home construction is stopped, but those projects that have their building permit and that have shovels in the ground are continuing to operate and build the houses that, you know, in essence, had the foundations already built in them. So we're not going to stop that midway through. So it's always a balancing act. You want to ensure that the construction workers that are on the sites are practicing a safe distance. The cleaning stations are properly maintained. I noticed, for instance, the one out here on Elgin Street is much better than I've ever seen it before. They have hand cleaning stations and so on, because even though these individuals are continuing to work, and we're grateful for that, we want to make sure that they go home safely and don't contract the virus. So hats off to our construction industry and the work that they're doing, but also to our staff here at the city, the public servants who are processing applications and so on as quickly as we can. And those that do require planning committee approval, we had a virtual planning committee meeting last week, and those will continue for those items that are deemed essential.
Okay. And Mayor Watson, I know you have the task group working on a recovery strategy for our city. And Lisa, you shared that you're working on the task group that was set out by Rod Phillip with the other economic ministers. So Mona, may I ask, what is the work being done at the federal level around recovery and taking into consideration, especially that many small businesses will require a lot of time maybe and support once recovery begins?
Well, I would love to tell you what the playbook looks like for recovery, but I cannot do that at this time. The federal government has really put forth emergency benefits for businesses, for Canadians. And I agree with Lisa that many of our ministers are talking about how we should be looking at recovery, bringing those ideas, and those conversations are really starting, but there's no specific plan out there right now. We are having conversations. We're trying to understand how it will affect all different sectors that we have across the country, especially I look here in Ottawa, but also in Ontario. Many sectors have been and will be really hit hard with COVID. I would say, though, we also have to realize that after this first peak, there will be other waves. We know that until we have a vaccine. So we have to think about assumptions on what do we do until we get that vaccine, and then how after we have that vaccine we will continue recovery. And there's all those assumptions that we're working on as we speak, and they will probably differ depending where you are across the country on the realities of the different economic sectors. So I would say at this time there are conversations. We're looking at what recovery could mean, but we're really focusing on the now and making sure that we get some support for businesses as we speak, and not just think about the future. So I know I'm probably not answering your question on what is exactly our plan, but we are really focusing on helping Canadians at this time and working diligently with the municipal and the provincial governments to try to see how do we get through this together.
I appreciate you saying that, and certainly the federal government, of course, is bearing the brunt of, not the brunt, but is very focused on now. And I know through the Canadian Chamber, they're working with a lot of national associations and the government around starting to talk about what recovery could look like. And I know in Ottawa, a lot of the tables are, what are the criteria for how we can start to stage back in? So.
And I really appreciate, if I can say, the hard work. Everybody's trying to look at the now and recovery, and we'll have to bring all this to see how we will move forward. I think that those exercises are very important, and we need to get that data. We need to get that information. And I know that Lisa has been working very hard with some of my colleagues trying to look at how do we manage through all this. So it's a very important exercise. But at this time, again, I just want to focus on the fact that we've been in this for a month, well, almost a month, and we need to support Canadians right now, because we know that many are finding it very hard to just go through this month, and then May 1st will come along and another stress will come up. So I think that we're really trying to work hard with everybody right now.
I think too, if I could jump in there, I think one of the things that we've demonstrated as Canadians, and particularly right here in Ontario, is retooling our manufacturing. Jim alluded to earlier, whether it's a brewery or a distillery transitioning to make hand sanitizer. We're seeing auto parts manufacturers making ventilators now. The Premier has been very clear that once we get manufacturing back up and running in Ontario, we're going to start supplying ourselves in the rest of Canada. And I think that level of optimism is important right now, because I think there will be a significant change to our economy. What we knew 5 weeks ago won't necessarily what we know 5 months from now. So I think that one of the things that has encouraged me is the work that my colleague, the economic development minister, Vic Fideli's been doing, is working with these manufacturers. And I've asked him at some point in the next couple of weeks if he could do a roundtable, virtually of course, with us in Ottawa and Eastern Ontario, to see if we have that capability here at a larger scale. So that's a conversation I think we have to have in terms of the recovery, is what is it going to look like? We don't necessarily know, but we do know that everyone in the world is literally in the same boat that we are. Yeah. And so to my friend and of course Jim's friend, Jim Diodati, the mayor of Niagara Falls, said to me early on, and he lost 40,000 jobs in one night in his municipality, and he looked at me and he said, it's not a time to panic, it's a time to plan. And so that's what I am intending to do. We're trying to, as Mona said, try to mitigate some of the fallout immediately by helping people, but then also making sure that we play the long game and look at the long view and what this is going to be like. So I think manufacturing is going to be key to that. And I think we're starting to prepare for that now.
Thank you.
I really want to echo that. I think, Lisa, you brought a great answer to that question, where we need to have a made in Ontario, made in Canada businesses and products. And we've really seen some very ingenious companies focus on that. And I believe that we have to continue that conversation and showing that we will have to produce a lot of things in our own country, in our own province. And that is really where we should be working on at this time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we're just a few minutes past the hour. I want to be respectful of your time. We still had a few questions here, but I will circle back with your permission for those few questions that and get those out to our members in our business community. I thank you all for the work that you are doing, and we appreciate the level of determination, concern, and compassion and collaboration that you've demonstrated. And we look forward to continuing to work with you so that we can get through this together and look forward to a rapid rebound. So I'm sure we will.
Ling, just offer a quick comment. First of all, it's nice to see everyone's artwork in your living rooms. This is quite a nice treat. But thank you very much to Sue Ling and the members of the Board of Trade for initiating this virtual roundtable. I'd be happy to participate in another one as we continue down the road together, and also to thank Mona and Lisa and their colleagues. They've been great to work with. They returned our calls within moments, and we're working really as a team. And I think this is going to bode well when we're through this terrible experience together, that we continue that sense of collaboration. We're never going to meet everyone's expectations. It's just not enough resources in the world to do that, but we want to do what we can to help those businesses that create jobs. So certainly on behalf of the city, we're looking forward to continue a strong relationship that we built over the years with you, Sue Ling, and Ian, and the entire board of directors. Alors, merci beaucoup à tous les membres du conseil d'administration pour votre bon travail, pour Mona et Lisa pour leur dévouement et leur assistance avec la ville. We really do appreciate the federal and provincial government's support. They've been great partners, as has the private sector, who have come up with innovative ideas to keep the economy going, even during this very challenging time. So it's a real pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, well, we'll see you again soon. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Merci tout le monde.
Stay healthy, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.